We are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes because of President Trump's unjustified trade actions and his threats to our sovereignty. Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us.
And happy Saturday, and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Val Atkinson is here. Hey, Val.
Hello, Ed.
Well, we're going to jump right into this. There's a lot to talk about. The first thing I had on my list in the intro to the program, the first image that comes up is about the tariffs that Donald Trump wants to impose now on the autos from Canada. And one of the things that's clear to me is that Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about lowering prices, because he's scantily said anything about lowering prices since he's been in office, and certainly hasn't talked about groceries anymore, the word he invented. You remember he said he invented the word grocery. Nobody ever uses it until he started using it. He hasn't lowered grocery prices or any price for that matter. And the stock market took a dive, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But tell me about these tariffs, Val. The net effect obviously is going to be increase in prices. But beyond that, what's the deal? Why is he stuck on tariff?
I think Donald Trump believes that he can reorder the entire world economic system. This whole business about tariffs is just a small part of that. He thinks that he can get people, other countries, so afraid of economic downturns that they will send products to the United States at the prices that Donald Trump approves. They will send their manufacturing facilities to the United States and have products made here instead of someplace else. And we will become this mammoth type of economic behemoth that rules the world economically, and everybody has to come and bow down to us on bended knee for a crust of bread 3 times a day. I mean, he's so stupid. He's so stupid that it seems like he's never thought of what are all these other countries going to be doing while I am enacting all of these tariffs to make us strong and make them weak. If we were a middle-tiered type of economic power on the planet right now, Ed, and he's trying to get to a point where Americans have a better standard of living, some folks could understand some of that. But you're already the world's most richest, most powerful nation by far. So where are you going with this? You have to be looking at taking what other countries, what little things they already have, like the rights to their minerals, the rights to their fisheries, the rights to their agriculture subsidy, everything from them, and put it all in one place and have everybody to come on bended knee and ask for crumbs. I don't know. That's the best I can come up with in terms of what he's thinking, what the end game is to what he's trying to do, trying to have all of the manufacturing places here, trying to induce tariffs so that people are paying there and we are gaining here. I don't understand it, Ed.
Yeah, I'm having trouble too, Val, because, the world has probably eclipsed 8 billion people now. There's 1.5 billion in India, 1.2 billion in China. There's a billion plus in Africa. And then throughout the rest of Asia, if you add up all those people, there's another 1.5 billion, 2 billion. But there's 350 million in America.
350 million people.
And somehow Trump seems to think that everything is going to run through America. I mean, for the last few episodes, I was in Tanzania and now back in the States. And one of the things that struck me, Val, is the port of Dar es Salaam is one of the busiest ports in the world. Nearly everything that goes into Africa from China and India comes in through Dar es Salaam. And I just watched, I would open my window and I could see all these trucks just leaving, just full of stuff going throughout those billion people in Africa. China doesn't even have to sell anything to the United States, neither does India, and they would be just fine. And I'm not sure why Americans think otherwise. That it makes more sense for a Chinese company to put a factory in East Africa than it would ever to be to put a factory in America, because you got all these people that in an emerging economy that could be their customer, as opposed to Americans who only want it cheap. And then now they're demanding that you put the labor there in America too. If I'm a Chinese company, I'd say F you. We're not doing that. That doesn't make any sense for us, because we're a sovereign nation too. We don't, like you say, bend down to the whims of America, which is what Donald Trump seems to be obsessed with, is that people defer to him personally. I mean, he has this dictator, mentality, and he clearly thinks that he's able to control the world by doing tariffs. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's only going to lead to more trouble. We didn't talk about this in the pre-work to the show today, but it does bring up this other problem, which is he's tanking the market. And by tanking the market, he's hurting people's retirement, 401k, and all that other stuff. Have you given any thought? It used to be, when Trump was in office, he tied everything to the stock market. I haven't heard them say anything about that since he's been back in office. Have you heard any rumblings, inkling
Well,
about how he's pitching this stock market crash?
he's just waiting for the stock market to go up and shoot out the roof and break 5,000 or whatever, and then he takes credit for it. But while it's doing bad or going south, he won't bring it up. That's the Roy Cohen type of communications that Donald Trump has accepted, and that's what he goes by. Only talk about things that make you look good. Deny anything that makes you look bad, call it fake news, do whatever you want, but be a one-way kind of person. You only associate yourself with the good things and never, ever, ever, ever the bad.
Yeah, because I think clearly from his standpoint, he has he can't ever talk about anything that would make him look bad, right? He has to always couch it in that he is completely in charge. So, like you said, I think he's waiting for the market to bounce back,
Yeah.
and then he'll
Then you start talking about the market.
he'll talk about it again. Let's switch gears, because this is related. Our neighbors to the north in Canada have a new prime minister. Whatever you say about the American system, it seems like the Canadians do it right. The previous prime minister Trudeau had been there for a long time, and when the party lost confidence in him, he just walked away. And now we have a new Canadian prime minister in Mark Carney, and there was like very little disruption. What's clear though is the Canadians have a position. Their position is if Donald Trump, and from the prime minister down to cabinet ministers, down to premiers from the different provinces, because they don't have states, Val. So talk to me real quick about what this whole still notion that somehow Canada is going to buckle down, and maybe even Greenland, and we could talk about both of those, and become states. Where the hell does that come from? Because I know you know a little more about how places become states, and I think it's relevant here in this discussion.
Yeah, well, and I want to get to that too, to share some information with our viewers and listeners about some of the rules for becoming states and that sort of thing. But taking a view from the 50,000 foot level for just a second here, Donald Trump has always thought that nobody, no country, no person should ever be in a position of challenging the United States of America and its leadership about anything. And as you said in your opening piece on this subject, uh, you know, Canada is an independent country and they don't mind saying no to the big bad wolf, the United States of America. He doesn't like that. He knows that there are a lot of people who have decided to get dual citizenship. There are some people who've even gone to Canada and said, bye bye, America. Canada is a place that's always talked about. They got better systems for health care. They got better system for taxation. They have better system for a lot of things. So he doesn't like that. So he wants to put a roadblock up and said, you think things are tough, you try to go to Canada, we're going to make that a state, and you won't be able to hide over there anymore. But it's not just that simple. And I would ask our viewers and listeners to go to Article 4, Section 3, I believe it is, Clause 1, and take a look at that as it sort of tries to outline, put some meat on the bones of the conversation dealing with how do you become a state? We look at Alaska, we look at Hawaii. They didn't just fundamentally fall into our hands and we said, oh, what do you got there? There's some rules about this. For an example, that you take a look at the census decides how many districts each state will have. And that's based on the total population. Last time I checked, Canada is a place of almost 40 million people. Do we have states that size? We only have one that's close to that. That's California with 39, 40 million people. They have 54, 55 congressional districts and 2 senators. So if Canada came in, they would have the same thing, 54, 55 congressional districts. And I doubt if all of them would be Republican. Matter of fact, they'd probably be 50 of them would be Democrat at least. And then you'd have 2 senators. That throws a monkey wrench into the whole system of counting votes, determining who the speaker is going to be, who has the majority in the Senate, the filibuster. I mean, it changes the entirety of politics in Washington as we know it. So people, he's getting by without even talking about that. And people need to understand. So instead of me trying to tell everybody what it's going to look like and whatever, go to Article 4, Section 3, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution. Take a look at it and read it for yourself and see what's going on. And the same thing would apply for Greenland as well.
Well, you're talking crazy talk, asking people to go read. Now, except for our audience, maybe, but
Yeah.
there's so many people, Val, that are so willing just to take serious Donald Trump's, pronouncements that Canada is going to be the 51st state. When you got Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., some other places, U.S. Virgin Islands, that would be much more of a candidate for that because
that's been begging.
Yeah. And all those places have a representative in the House that, that can talk, but doesn't really, have any power, right? They don't have any voting power, but they do have representation. Even Guam, for that matter, has representation, but they don't get a vote. I think if Trump wanted to do anything, that's where he should start, because to your point, is he would all but decimate the Republican Party's chances of ever holding the House,
Right.
ever, and then would always put the Senate in jeopardy because the Senate is almost split 50-50 now in 2 seats. I mean, and it doesn't make sense, in terms of, Canadians in Northwest Territory are very different from Canadians in Nova Scotia in terms of, what they're concerned about, right? Northwest Territory, there's a lot of logging and all that other stuff, but you go to Nova Scotia, they're worried about fishing rights and some other stuff that's completely different. So I think it's all stupid. If you want to know what I really think about, you know what? I think it's a good time to take a break, and I want to come back. I do want to pick up on Greenland, and because JD Vance made a visit there. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Here's the deal. We gotta set ourselves up. See, retirement is the long game. We can't play about our future or our finances. And no matter what hand we're dealt, we still work our way to the win. Make moves and make them early. Set up goals. Don't worry about a setback. Just save up, stack up to reach them. Let's put ourselves in the right position. Now is the time to play with purpose. Let's play to win, so our future follows suit. Pre-game to greater things. This is Pretirement.
This was originally supposed to be a private tour by Usha Vance, the wife of the Vice President. With the relations between the US and the Danish territory souring, there were warnings of protests. Then it emerged that J.D. Vance was coming here together with a group of US diplomats, despite the fact the Greenland government hadn't actually invited them. Well, they've arrived, but the trip is now being held in a remote US base hundreds of miles from the capital here, Nuuk in Greenland. And of course, earlier on today, Greenland declared a new coalition government with a promise of unity and national unity.
And welcome back to our second segment of The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, March 29th, 2025. Because you can't always blame Canada, I decided to wear that. We just finished talking about whether or not Canada was going to be the 51st state, and I think there's unanimity, at least on the deal panel, that is bullshit and never going to happen. But on top of that, there's much more pressing issues that we need to discuss. One of the things that's also part of this, Val, so we start off with tariffs, and then we talked about how America is perceived by the rest of the world, and then we talked about Canada and their new prime minister and so on and so forth. But you saw in the lead-in on the way back, J.D. Vance and his wife went to Greenland. And for what reason, I'm still not aware. They went to visit the troops because we've always had a military presence there, right, Val? That's a place where we watch the rest of the world from. It's a good place to watch the rest of the world. And Greenland has never denied us, and Denmark, for that matter, who is in control of Greenland, has never denied us the right to be there. Guess what, Val? Because Denmark is in NATO. Go figure. So, can you tell me what this Denmark thing is really all about? It's not about Denmark being a state. Or Greenland being a state. In this complete disrespect for Danish sovereignty, because the Danes have ruled Greenland for a long time, and Greenland's sovereignty for that matter. The complete disrespect, I think, is because they want to force the takeover of mineral rights to help Elon Musk and people like him. What do you think about that?
That's exactly right. You've hit the nail right on the head. Mineral rights. The other thing that they are telling the world that they want it for is to have a military advantage of dealing with intercontinental ballistic missiles coming over the poles. You know, our east-west pickup of missiles is good. North-south is where we are lacking just a little bit. But if you get all of your military apparatuses in Greenland, you'll have that laid down. The other part of that is you would block China from ever trying to do anything, make a deal with the Danes, with Denmark, to place some troops there or get some radar tracking devices themselves, because that area would belong to the United States of America. And Denmark could not make a decision that would not be advantageous to us anymore. And we'd be getting the mineral rights, and Musk would be happy with his billions and billions and trillions of dollars and power and those kinds of things. But you know, the average American, it never hears about this kind of stuff. They never will. You know, they only hear what Donald Trump wants them to hear. It's misinformation on the way to disinformation. You know, that's all it is, and that's all it ever will be. That's why I encourage people, pick up literature, do cross-referencing, cross-checking yourself, and read, folks. Read, please. Don't let these talking heads and these politicians lead you astray, because they're just in it for themselves, most of them.
Well, not even listen to us necessarily.
Right. Read.
But here's something you can hear. This is the Danish foreign minister just a little while ago, Lars Rasmussen, talking about J.D. Vance's visit to Greenland.
I have a message for our American friends and all others who are listening. Much is being said these days. Many accusations and many allegations have been made. And of course, we are open to criticism. But let me be completely honest. We do not appreciate the tone in which it's being delivered. We respect that the United States needs a greater military presence in Greenland, as Vice President Vance mentioned this evening. We, Denmark and Greenland, are very much open to discussing this with you, with an open mind. Today, NATO's security guarantee also covers Greenland. But we very much welcome if NATO and allies would play a greater role in the Arctic.
So, Val, Foreign Minister Rasmussen said that, you know, to make allegations that Denmark and Greenland don't care about security of the Arctic is a bad tone. That it strikes them as being disingenuous, and it's not the appropriate tone. And if they're going to be allies, then treat us such. Don't be coming in and accusing Denmark of not doing what they're supposed to do. And I think that's the right message, Val, from the foreign minister. Like I said, I mean, people are so easily duped. And you're right, they're not reading, they're not paying attention to what this is really about. And it's about mineral rights. Because Trump said as much a number of times. He's let the cat out of the bag, because that's how he's proceeding with the next story that I want to talk about is Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
He thought he was going to browbeat Ukraine into signing some agreement that would hand over all their mineral rights in exchange for support against Putin. And I think what Zelensky realized is that there was no guarantee that Trump would do that. He would take the mineral rights, give them to Elon Musk, and still not deal with Putin.
That's right.
Capitulate. So what do you think about Zelensky? He was back in France yesterday, meeting with France and Britain and the rest of the Europeans. Do you think they're just going to go it alone and just forget about any kind of American influence over this Ukrainian conflict from now on?
He's in a bad place right now, Zelensky is, because he can't afford to tell America to go take a hike, because he'll be between the devil and the deep blue sea for real then. So he's almost forced to play the game. He's in a position right now that he almost knows that there is a buffer zone of territory in his country that he is very, very likely to lose to the Russians. And I use the term buffer zone because that's being euphemistic and not calling it what it really is. It's a land grab by the Russians. But we'll use the term buffer zone, and also he'll agree that he will not seek NATO membership and be glad with that. And there are probably a few under the table things that won't be heard or talked about that he'll agree to as well, so that the Russians can say, yeah, we got a deal. And Trump can walk away saying, yeah, I brokered this deal. If Biden were still in, they'd still be fighting. And then Trump gets something out of the deal. So I'm walking away thinking that this is not going to end well for Ukraine or Zelensky. but it's the best that's on the table for him right now. He doesn't have a old United States of America that we used to have a few decades ago that would be with him until the end, thick or thin. He doesn't have that anymore in Donald
Right.
Trump. So
Right.
he's got to take whatever he can get, which is going to be the deal that the Russians put on the table. And he'll understand that we are backing the Russians now more so than we're backing him. So he's really almost defenseless.
Yeah, between a rock and a hard place for real, because
Absolutely.
there's not a whole lot of room. Now, I think the only good thing for Ukraine is that I don't think the Russian public is all that interested in continuing to fight against Ukraine. They've lost a lot of people, and then the Russian population's been diminishing over time. I saw an infographic the other day that showed that almost 90% of people in the Russia lives like within a couple of hours flight from Moscow. And Russia's vast, so all those other 10 time zones, 9 or 10 time zones beyond Moscow, only 20% of the people live over there, right? So Russia's emptied out. And so they had to go get North Koreans to try to fight Ukraine, and then the North Koreans did such a bad job. They had incredible losses. I don't know if they're going to continue to be supportive. China hasn't stepped in. I think the real situation here for Ukraine is that their best hope is to have France and Britain and all of them step up and put some additional pressure, because you're not going to get any pressure from Donald Trump. I think he's clear that unless there's mineral rights involved, he's not interested. But again, we talked about Greenland before, and Canada for that matter. It's all about mineral rights. It doesn't have anything to do about people's sovereignty or whether or not they would be governed better, because clearly everybody that we're talking about has universal health care. Has medical leave for fathers when a baby's born. Ukraine has that too. And the only people in this picture who don't have it is the United States. So why would those people want to join the United States, Val? They wouldn't. That's the real answer. So we'll put a pin in that. So Greenland, Canada, and Ukraine are three countries that we got a serious problem with, that we need to deal with, on the foreign policy side, but they also have domestic implications, because I think Trump is trying to use that to prove to the Trumpsters that he's tough, right? That's the bottom line. So one last thing, Val, about sort of internationally is, and we'll finish the topic on the other side, but I want to start it now. Is let's take a look at some video. There was a hearing the other day about the use of Signal to transmit messages, war plans, as it were.
Did you participate in the group chat with Secretary of Defense and other Trump senior officials discussing the Yemen war plans?
I'm not going to get into the specifics.
So you
of
refuse
the
to acknowledge whether you were on this group chat?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics.
Why aren't you going to get into the specifics? Is it because it's all classified?
It's the group chat message heard around the world, as it's still trying to be figured out how a journalist was added to a secret message chain with high-level officials in the U.S. government about an upcoming military attack. The legal and national security questions mount. Was this legal? Did someone commit perjury? Will charges follow? What are the repercussions?
So, Val, that's Tulsi Gabbard. She never should have been confirmed as the director of anything, especially not secret information. Right. She couldn't even explain, Val, whether or not she was on this text stream. And the only reason why we know about this text stream is because they included a reporter. Now, there's been some accusations by some people on the left that maybe Hegseth, the defense secretary, and that's hard to say after Lloyd Austin was defense secretary, but Pete Hegseth, some people said, well, maybe he was drunk. I won't go that far because I don't know, But my opinion is that they were using Signal, Val, because it wasn't on the government network. It would not be archived. It would not go to the National Archive. It would not be traceable. It would disappear in 30 days and nobody would have known that that conversation took place, but for somebody putting the wrong phone number in there. What do you make of what they were doing on Signal and what the real implications are?
Well, I'm going to turn this thing around 180 on you, Ed. You're the tech guy on this piece here. This is what you do for a living. You've been doing it for a long time. And I want to ask you to tell our listening audience how that works without getting too far down into the weeds that some of us common folks don't understand what you're talking about. Tell us in common language, if you could, how this whole technological piece works, that something as simple as putting in a wrong phone number has stopped somebody from doing things that they shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah, but for the fact that that wrong number is there, we wouldn't have known, because Signal and products like that encrypt the message, right? And they go into Signal's stream of data. It goes into their back end servers that aren't available to the public. And one of the reasons why people use it, people like me, that do some journalism from time to time or act as sources in journalistic stories, is because it can't be traced, right? Once you do it, nobody even knows that it occurred. And then you can set a timer for it to disappear. And then it's gone. And then nobody knows that conversation took place except for the people who were in the conversation. And so the reason why it is verboten and not to be used in government settings is because you have to make a record of everything. But I think that that's precisely why they used it here. And I think the reason why the reporter from the Atlantic ended up in somebody's list of people is because they probably used him as they've probably been a source before and have fed this person information. Because why else would you have a reporter from the Atlantic's phone number that you could even mistakenly put in there? Mm-hmm. And so I've heard a couple of people say this. They said, well, maybe it was a deliberate screw up, right, to show how bad things are. But you have to still be a coward to do that, Val, because, listen, if you really believe what the Trump administration is doing is wrong, then you shouldn't be in it. Or you should speak up and say what it is. But I think it basically comes down to the fact that they were trying to hide. And then somebody made a mistake and revealed what was happening. So the simple answer to your question is that it encrypts messages so people can't read them. And then they disappear after a while so people can't trace them. But anyway, I hear some music in my ear. That means we need to take a break. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to come to the United States because I want to talk about the Smithsonian. I want to talk about all these people being picked up and deported. And then I also want to talk about West Virginia and them not getting any FEMA support. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this music.
Firearms are the #1 cause of death among kids, but we know that healthcare workers can make a huge difference. This is why prevention is absolutely critical. Let's agree to agree that we all have a role to play in ending this crisis.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of the deal. I'm Ed Clark, that's Val Atkinson. We've been chopping it up today. We started off with tariffs, moved on to Canada, Greenland, Ukraine, what the French are doing in terms of being the leaders of that, trying to resolve what's happening in the Ukraine-Russian war, and so on and so forth. And Val, when we left, I said I wanted to talk about stuff that was going on here at home. And let's go to something that still has a leg in the international realm, and that is prisoners being sent to El Salvador, to the Supermax prison down there. They've been snatching people off the street. And the claim, Val, is that these people are Venezuelan gang members. And before I have you talk about it, let's take a look at a clip about a guy who's a gay hairdresser who got picked up because he had tattoos, and now he's gone missing in El Salvador.
Again, the White House has said the 260 people it flew to a notorious prison in El Salvador were members of a dangerous Venezuelan gang. But my next guest argues her client is not a member of that gang, that he's an asylum seeker. Joining us now, Executive Director of the Immigrant Defenders Law Center, Lindsay Toslovsky. Lindsay, thanks for being here. Who is your client?
So our client is a professional in his 30s. He's a gay man, works in the arts industry. He's someone that the lawyers from our office who have been meeting with him directly have described him as sweet, funny, and he's someone who has no criminal history. He entered the United States in the way that our government asked people to do. Last year, he made an appointment through CBP-1. He was processed. He asked for protection. He passed his credible fear interview. He was in the midst of his proceedings. He remained in detention solely because the government alleged that his tattoos were made him part of Tren de Aragua. However, his tattoos, I can say, looking at the evidence, are tattoos that you might see on any art student walking around on the streets in the United States. They're benign tattoos. And he finds himself now in El Salvador after, no hearing, no ability for us to refute the baseless allegations that he's a member of this gang.
Have you been able to make contact with him?
We have not. We have requested to be able to access our client to ICE. And within the last hour, we were actually given confirmation that they will not facilitate any such contact. They are saying that he has been removed. We have received no documentation of this. The only reason that we even knew that he was in El Salvador and had the confirmation, although we suspected it, was because he had an immigration court hearing on Monday. So on Monday of this week, he had that hearing. And because of that, we got confirmation that he was in El Salvador, but we have received no written documentation from ICE or from the government about the circumstances of his removal. And now, after asking to speak with him, we have been told that they will not facilitate any such contact.
Where is he from originally?
He is from Venezuela, and so he came here fleeing political persecution. He arrived, as I said, through lawful means to get an appointment to seek protection under U.S. law. And he arrived last year. Upon entry, Customs and Border Protection and ICE determined that he needed to be detained because of his tattoos. That is something that we would absolutely refute in a hearing because the tattoos are clearly not gang related. And as I mentioned.
So, Val, here's my issue. You tell me whether or not it's yours, but I have an issue about the due process rights, even if these people are foreign. Now, if they're here illegally, and they've never gone through the process, but this guy who is the gay hairdresser had, some status. He was awaiting a hearing. And the only reason they could identify us to pick him up is because he had tattoos. So what's going on here, Val?
It is stupidity at a very, very high level, Ed. They're trying to satisfy a campaign promise. One of the things that Donald Trump has been tough on, or tried to be tough on, since he came down the escalator in 2015 is deportations. He thought that deportations and building a wall and being tough on immigration was the ticket to the White House, and he was right. And you can talk about all the other things that he has talked about and done. The centerpiece of his elective office, his public office, and his appearance in the public realm has been immigration. He knows that America is full of people who don't like Hispanics. They're full of people who don't like immigrants. They're full of people who think America first, one language. English should be the number one mandatory language in the United States of America, maybe around the world. But getting back to your point, Ed, this guy has been trying to fulfill his campaign promises on immigration ever since he's been in office. So that's what pushes and motivates him to do what he's doing now. And he feels that there is no losing here. There's nothing he can do that would be over the line. He doesn't feel that he can do anything to piss people off, so to speak. That he can pick people up off the street, PhD candidates who are just out protesting, exercising their First Amendment rights and those kind of things, and just throw them somewhere in jail. No due process, as you aptly pointed out. And he knows there's going to be nobody that's going to stand up for him. If you try to stand up for him, you're not an American citizen, you're going to find yourself deported in El Salvador or someplace, not finding a way back. And if you are an American citizen, you may find yourself without the rights and privileges that the Constitution affords you as far as free speech is concerned, and no due process. So he's just behaving as a dictator because he knows he can. And there's nobody to stop him. The guardrails that are supposed to be in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate and the courts have all been taken down so Donald Trump can be and act as he chooses.
Mm-hmm.
No, he may not be a dictator as far as the titular assignment is. May not have the name of a dictator, is what I'm trying to say. But as far as performance is concerned, he might as well be.
Yeah, so he's in fact, because he's behaving.
He's a de facto dictator.
Mm-hmm.
He may not be a de jure dictator,
Mm-hmm.
but he is a de facto dictator for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some Americans, Ed, that really kind of rile me, that they're okay with this.
Yeah, they let it go on.
How can you be an American and support the ideals of democracy and Americanism and still support and be okay with a dictator? It just
baffling
to no end.
Yeah, it's baffling, which, I mean, I'm glad you brought up these PhD students, that, you write a piece for the campus newspaper, and next thing you know, you find yourself in a detention center in Louisiana without representation.
Right.
And then Marco Rubio, who family came over from Cuba on asylum, says that if you speak against America, then he has the right to revoke your visa, your student visa. And some 300 odd people have had their student visas revoked without any due process, because I guess technically the Secretary of State controls passports and visas. And so he can remove your visa, but it needs to be a good reason, Val. And so I think this is going to extend to people that, again, who maybe have been born here, but their parents weren't born here or may have been illegal. And they're going to try to find a way to get to those people, because this whole idea of birthright citizenship, Donald Trump doesn't like either. And more precisely, Stephen Miller doesn't like, who, we know Stephen Miller very well because I will point out he went to Duke University, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. Somebody has on a Duke shirt, so I don't know. But Stephen Miller went to Duke, and so did a number of other very right-wing people. There's some president, named Richard Nixon went to Duke, So very, very criminally minded people are attached to Duke, but that's a whole nother subject. What I do want, on a serious note, Stephen Miller is the dangerous one. And the weird part, Val, is Stephen Miller is Jewish. His family has disowned him. They don't understand his obsession with Nazis and whatever. He's just a weird dude. And he's about to cause all kind of trouble. And I feel for those people who are in detention who shouldn't be. Now, whether they came in legally or not should be easy to settle. And all of them have, at least most of the ones that, are protesting, saying that they shouldn't be in. The ones who've ended up in El Salvador are in a supermax prison And I think that's cruel and unusual punishment, but that the court's going to have to take that up. Let's go specifically to the United States, though, Val. Uh, here's some video about a new executive order taking over the Smithsonian Museum.
President Trump fires a broadside at one of America's leading cultural institutions, the Smithsonian, saying he wants to deny funding for what he calls improper ideology.
It's his latest step in trying to change American culture, which he feels has become too liberal. Political reporter Marcia Kramer joins us with more. Marcia.
Well, Alice and Dick, there are several things you need to know about the executive order. It was signed behind closed doors. The president named Vice President J.D. Vance as his enforcer. He also wants to restore statues and monuments of Confederate figures, many of which were removed after the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And many, many people are upset.
The idea that he's going after the Smithsonian is absurd.
Congressman Josh Gottheimer reacting to an executive order called Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History, in which President Trump takes aim at the highly respected Smithsonian Institution, seeking to purge its 21 museums, libraries, research centers, and the National Zoo of, quote, divisive narratives and, quote, improper ideology. And he named Vice President J.D. Vance, who serves on the Smithsonian's Board of Regents, to enforce efforts to, quote, remove improper ideology from all areas of the institution. It is Trump's latest effort to go after universities and art that he considers out of step with the conservative values of his party. Museums in our nation's capital should be places where individuals go to learn, not to be subjected to ideological indoctrination or divisive narratives that distort our shared history, the order states.
Of course, on message for him, but totally against what we should be doing.
The order also directed the Secretary of the Interior to evaluate the removal of monuments, statues, and markers at federal parks and facilities that were, quote, removed or changed to perpetuate a false reconstruction of American history. People going to the National Museum.
So, Val, the order specifically names the Museum of African American History and Culture and the American Women's History Museum as examples of facilities that divide America. So you can't talk about slavery, Val. You can't talk about anything, he said, because it divides America. So the executive order that Trump signed on the 27th is going to give J.D. Vance, head of the board of the Smithsonian. Now, and his job is to remove improper ideology. So, Val, I need first for you to tell me what is improper ideology and what is going to be the future of the Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C.
First of all, take your last question first. They're going to try to kill it. They're going to try to take away the funding. And if we want to have an African American museum, it's going to have to be funded by Black folks and other people who support truth in history and those kinds of things. That's the first thing he's going to try to do. Secondly, this guy thinks that anything that you say that may make any white person feel bad is not American. And you shouldn't be allowed to say and do those things. And that's why things like DEI and affirmative action and all of that and being woke is talking about how some white people have done things that have caused great harm and pain and suffering to non-whites. They don't want that to be talked about because it may make some white child that they are trying to lie to and brainwash. They don't want to make them feel bad when they hear the truth about their ancestors. So the way to handle that best is to deny Americans from talking about, bringing up the subject, participating in things, and Lord knows, funding things that may make little Johnny and little Becky feel bad about their ancestors and the things they did to Native Americans and African Americans and Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans, and we could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
That's been the history of this country. And if you don't want to take a look at that and accept that, well, make sure you don't do it again. But right now, you're on the road to doing it again.
Yeah.
And you would do the same thing to some other people you're about to that you did to the Native Americans and the African American, Chinese American, Japanese American. You do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so just by not allowing people to talk about it is not going to get rid of it.
Well, and I think you identified the real thing here is that the funding would be cut off because the other part of the executive order says that the Office of Management and Budget can prohibit federal money from going to specifically the Museum of African American History if it has any exhibits that are divisive and goes against American ideology.
Yeah.
And I don't know who's going to be the arbiter of that and who defines that. I presume it's J.D. Vance, and we know where he stands.
And Scott Turner.
Yeah. So the bottom line, Val, is that they're just nasty, mean people, and we've come down to that. But here's the thing: the people that voted for Donald Trump, who have made this possible. The people in West Virginia, in Kentucky, and even North Carolina, because Kamala didn't win North Carolina either. The white folks who voted for Donald Trump, who expected him to help them because they believe in zero-sum politics, right? If you help them, you can't help me, so don't help them and I'll get help. It's not turning out that way, Val. So here's a story from West Virginia about the flooding from a couple of weeks ago that's under the radar.
Driving up and down these roads is so sad, to see the magnitude of how many people lost everything.
The needs are astronomical. There's people that's literally sleeping in their yards.
What's your typical day-to-day been like?
Chaos times 1,000.
I don't mean to get emotional and stuff, man, but I've seen a lot here. And it's just, it's just sad.
A few weeks ago, my phone started blowing up. West Virginia, my home state, was underwater. Friends were sending me videos of total devastation. But when I turned on the national news, nothing.
You absolutely have to beg people to pay attention. It's like, look, we're dying. Hey, we're dead now.
This is probably the worst flood that this town has experienced.
And from what I was hearing, the government was nowhere to be found either.
What kind of help are you expecting to get as time goes on?
Well, I don't expect to get anything from the government because they're never here. They never help. Like, I've never got any help. If we want something done, you got to do it by yourself.
FEMA's turned out to be a disaster. I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away.
So, Val, these are some Trump supporters saying, where's the federal government? Where's FEMA? Well, Kristi Noem wants to get rid of FEMA. Instead of being in West Virginia, she was in El Salvador, poking fun at people who are in jail in El Salvador instead of dealing with West Virginia. The flooding in West Virginia may be worse than the flooding that was in North Carolina. It's at least on the same scale. And these people in West Virginia stand there going, I can't believe Donald Trump isn't doing anything to help us. It's not funny in terms of, because I don't want anybody to suffer. It's ironically funny, right? That these people find themselves in this place. You tell me, Val, is he ever going to do anything for these people in West Virginia?
No, because he very definitely is aware, Ed, that these people really didn't vote for him because they wanted him to do something for them. That's not the real reason most white folks voted for Donald Trump. The real reason that most white folks voted for Donald Trump is they were afraid they were going to lose their culture. They were afraid they're going to lose their country. And you got some of those poor white people in West Virginia that you're talking about right now that has lost everything to the flood, that may not be able to rebuild, may have a terrible rest of their lives. But if Donald Trump or somebody like Donald Trump can be in charge of the United States of American government, they're satisfied. They're still satisfied, and they would go and vote for him tomorrow.
Yeah.
Have lost everything that they have, and they would vote for him tomorrow because the direction of the country, who runs the country, what the country stands for, what it represents, the history of the country, all of that's far more important than their personal possessions and that sort of thing. So that's why he realizes this. That's why he doesn't have to help them. That's why he can take away funding for places like not only West Virginia that you cited, but Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky, places that are on the bottom of the economic stratification in every type of cross-section that you care to look at for states in the United States of America. Those 3 or 4 states are on the bottom in every category, economically speaking. But they listen to the lies and the rhetoric from Donald Trump that says we should turn this back over to the states. We get rid of FEMA and let the states build your bridges back up and let the states give you money for your home to be repaired. And people in Mississippi and Alabama say, yeah, that's fine. You know, your state can't do that. Right now, if California and New York weren't overpaying in taxes and under receiving federal aid, and you underpaying taxes and over receiving in federal aid, if that wasn't the case, you'd have big time problems. You couldn't even run your state.
Yeah. And that's all the way down to the schools, Val. I mean, states like Kentucky get over 60% of their money because so many kids qualify for special education and free lunch and all kind of stuff. They get so much money from the federal government. You know what? We're not going to solve that problem. They're going to have to solve that for themselves. They're going to have to decide whether or not they really care about grandma. We say it all the time. They will kill grandma if they have to support Donald Trump. They'd rather for grandma to die.
Yep.
Than give up.
That's right.
Well, you know what, Val? We're at the point where I ask you, what do we need to know for the week coming up? Anything you need to tell us? What's going on? And please, 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 please don't tell me that Duke is going to be in the Final Four. But go ahead.
I am going to make that prediction that we will be in the Final Four. We will just by the skinny of our teeth get by Alabama tonight, but we'll be in the Final Four. But I ain't going to make any predictions beyond that because I got to be honest with you, Florida scares me to death.
Yeah,
I think they're the best team left, but I expect Duke to do well. I'm not so sure about Houston. They're not playing on all cylinders right now, and Auburn is a little bit overrated. So I'm looking at Auburn, Florida, Duke, and Houston. And I would say Florida has the best chance to take it all from those four.
I think that's the consensus too. And then I even went to one of the women's games, Val. I went to Carolina game when they played in the first round over in Chapel Hill. Went to Carmichael for the first time in a long time. It's a really nice facility, especially for a women's game because it was packed out. You know, it is about 7,500 fans fit in there. It's the right size venue. It made it feel like, you know, the old Carmichael, you know, in terms of energy and that kind of thing. But they lost to some team over in Durham. And frankly, I watched the game, Val, and neither team was shot well. It was 37-49 or something like that. It was a very low scoring game and it was really sloppy. And Duke needs to fix that in the next round, though, if they want to go any further on the women's side. Anyway, listen, folks, we always appreciate you taking the time to come in with us. Make sure you tell people about us. You can subscribe on Spotify, YouTube. You can go to Facebook. You can go to our website, thedealwithedclark.com. All those places. And if you go to dealwithedclark.com and just click on the RSS feed and you just copy that, anytime we come on, you'll have the show. You don't have to worry about anything. But of course, if you subscribe as well, that's the same thing on any of those platforms. You never miss an episode because sometimes we're not here every week and sometimes we're here twice in a week. It just depends. So make sure that you subscribe. Anyway, we're going to get out of here. Go out and do something good for somebody today, and we really do mean that. And we'll see you next time. Bye.